Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Hospitality MD podcast. Today, we are very pleased to bring back for the second time to this show. Actually, I think he's the first guest to come back for a second episode. Our good friend, Jonathan Fabietti from Long Island, New York. Thank you so much for coming back and joining us on the show. It's awesome to have you.
Hey, and thank you guys for having me. And I just wanted to say congratulations to you on that feature with the Hotel Botley. Um,
Oh yeah,
there's
with Paula from Hotel Chat or Ask Suite Hotel Chatbot. Yeah, thank you so much, man. That was
Chatbot.
a yeah, that
Yeah,
was
no,
awesome.
that's awesome, and it just goes to show that if you're really passionate about something, you could accomplish anything. So keep up what you're doing because it's obviously working.
Yeah, we're just trying to keep the momentum going here at Hospitality MD, and with that being said, we do have some big announcements coming up soon, which we will certainly talk about here in the next couple of weeks. Now, before we get started, I just want to remind everybody listening that if you are enjoying our show and you like the podcast, please be sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe on Spotify, and like and share it with your hospitality friends. So, Jonathan, offline, we were just talking about when the last time we had you on the show is. It feels like it's been much longer than it has been. And I've enjoyed staying in contact with you and, having another friend in the industry as a result of you being on the show for this, essentially for the entire year up until this point. While it's felt like much longer, we released your first episode on January 20th of this year, before the hotel industry collapsed and everything
Essentially.
went a different direction. So it does feel like a lifetime has passed, and I'm sure a lot's changed for you since then, as it has for us as well, and I'm sure for everybody listening. And that's the reason why we wanted to do this episode, was to kind of catch up with you, see where you're at since we last talked, and kind of discuss your new role as a first-time official hotel manager. So, Jonathan, last time we talked to you, you were a guest service agent and night auditor at the Courtyard by Marriott in Long Island, New York. You have since left that role. Why don't you tell everybody where you're at and what you're doing now?
Yes. So we've gone, I just want to start off by saying we've gone through a very tough time as a whole when it comes to looking at the industry. I've had to take on a lot of roles at my previous property that normally I wouldn't have to. I was working overnights, essentially 5, 6 nights a week. And it just took a toll on me. You could only do so much. So what I had a colleague reach out to me that I've known for a while. She reached out to me and works for a luxury beachfront property in the city of Long Beach. It's called the Alegria Hotel. I am now working as the front office supervisor over there, and it's been quite a unique experience in that my first day was the hurricane. We had some devastating damage done due to Hurricane Isaias, primarily because we've been on a beachfront. We're located right next to the boardwalk, which is where the most damage comes when it comes to hurricanes. That was a very unique experience to lead and manage a team during that time because you have to remain calm. And you're in the middle of a hurricane, especially due to the fact that we're in the middle of a global pandemic. And so it really challenged me in terms of what it means to be a true leader in the industry, where we had to unfortunately close for about a week because of the damage we sustained from the hurricane. I was helping engineering fix air conditioning units. I was cleaning around the house, make sure everything's clean and sanitized and everything. It's just been a it's been a very productive start to my first official leadership position.
Yeah, that's if it wasn't already hard enough, kind of it smack dab in the middle of a pandemic that has, kind of, granted it's hurt the economy as a whole, but disproportionately has affected the hotel and hospitality industries. You're inheriting a team that has primarily worked through the pandemic as the hotel was open, and then you start your first week and the hotel gets battered by a natural disaster, and you have to close. And this is not only for your team but also for you. Like, I mean, you probably didn't even know your full way around the hotel, let alone be able to kind of navigate such a unique and kind of almost a once in a lifetime disaster that would take place while on property of the hotel. So to be clear, were you on duty when the hotel would, like, was there a specific moment that was like, oh my God, this is getting really, really bad, and we're starting to see some damage occur? Like, what was that kind of as the hurricane was ramping up? What was that like?
Well, yeah. So I was on duty during the day where Isaias was hitting. Um, Thank God, no, what was it? The building didn't sustain like physical damage or anything. We had no air conditioning, which was real bad, especially in August, where it's the hottest times of the like July, beginning of August, where it's like the hottest times of the year. So that was primarily the reason why we closed, is because it became a health and safety risk for the guests that were staying there. We had to call all the guests that were originally coming in, reschedule their stays when we decided to close and everything. And it was just a I realized it was a big deal when right when the power went out. Right when the power went out, that's when, and when I found out the air conditioning was going to be an issue, that's when it really hit me. And I said, okay, we're probably going to have to close because of this. It was unique also because I had just started the job, and I'm in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, oh, first start and probably first gone. So, but
You
luckily
were
that
even
wound up
thinking,
not being the
like,
case.
yeah, so you were even in the moment thinking, like, who knows how long the hotel's gonna have to close? They may just lay me off or just let me go at this point, just terminate you outright because you had just started, and they're like, well, the hotel's not open and certainly not going to need you. And to your point, luckily that was not the case here. So during, the initial impact of the hurricane on the hotel, so obviously you had guests staying, you had staff working. Um, were you full? Like, was it busy? I mean, I'm sure just managing those guest expectations during that time must have been very challenging for a lot of people who were scared, both staff and guests. What was the kind of anxiety in the hotel like during that time from a guest and employee standpoint?
Well, it all stems from the top, I'll say, where it's like you have to have a calm and civilized manner, because if the people at the top have a calm and civilized manner, then the people under you, as well as the people staying with you, are going to be very calm, cool, and collected, and it won't cause panic. So my first thought was I needed to remain calm and portray an image that we had everything under control. Um, it was it was challenging because obviously we're right smack in the middle of the hurricane, and we're more worried about the safety of everybody. And it was a very challenging kind of moment. But I would say the main thing that I really needed to focus on was remaining calm in that instance and making sure that everybody was safe. Everybody wound up being safe. Thank God there were no injuries or anything. But it's again, emotions were also very heightened too, because while we're also in the middle of a hurricane, we're also trying to make sure that we're implementing the CDC guidelines that were suggested and making sure that everybody's social distancing. So on top of that, you have people that are genuinely worried about the pandemic too. So it was I had to take a very interesting approach to ensure that my staff had the resources they needed to succeed for our guests, as well as making sure that everybody in the building was A-okay.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I can, certainly relate to, that sentiment of remaining calm and trying to, even if you, because I mean, I'm sure admittedly, right, you had to have been like, if the power is going out, air conditioning is going down, you're just starting. I'm sure admittedly you're probably thinking to yourself, oh shit, like this is, you don't have all the answers. You've never been through anything like that before, but just to remain calm and kind of fake it till you make it, essentially, just to have that aura of like, okay, we're in control here, really goes a long way. I definitely kind of echo that when I talk about my good friend and former colleague Curtis, who's the director of security at the Witt Hotel, and when the hotel was unfortunately intruded by rioters and looters in Chicago during the riots that occurred after George Floyd passed away. We had a hotel full of guests and full of team, and our director of security stepped up and until the very last second put himself kind of on the line to make sure that everybody was safe and everybody felt comfortable. And so whether it's a situation like that or a situation like a hurricane, that demeanor, I think, to your point, is paramount and almost the number one priority. But I want
to make clear too that like one of the things that I did before my first day was I went on my time off to walk around the building to get myself familiarized with everything. Because if you recall, they were reporting about the hurricane, I think about days prior. So I predicted that this would be an issue, and so I walked around the building, got myself familiarized with everything, mask on and everything, and I was able to outperform my manager's expectations because I knew my way around the building and I knew how to get to certain places that I wouldn't have known if I didn't take a personal tour around the building. So I try to get myself familiarized with that, as well as like the local points of interest before I start any sort of job, because it's important. You're working at front desk, you have to know a little bit of everything, and made my manager's jobs easier because they don't have to explain certain things about the local area. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I live an hour away from this place.
Okay. Yeah. That'll definitely do it. And I think, when you start a job, right, you're going to be guest facing on day one, even if you're training. So the guest doesn't care necessarily if you live an hour away or that it's your first day. Granted, most guests are pretty understanding about that, but in general, they don't care. They just expect that, you live an hour away. Well, they live hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles away and are traveling in there and expect a certain level of expertise when it comes to that. So yeah,
there's no excuse.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's an interesting point that, maybe not required for a lot of new people, to go out of their way and do that, but it's certainly paid off in dividends in your specific circumstances. So, as you kind of, obviously the hotel reopened, you recovered from that unfortunate circumstance. This ultimately, getting back to the bare basics, was your first official leadership position within a hotel, let alone a high profile beach and boardwalk boutique property such as the Allegria. What were some of your first challenges that you had, and more so personally, like with kind of assuming that leadership role? If think back to that, okay, everything's open, we're back in business after the hurricane. Think back to your kind of first day of normalcy on the job, and what that was like for you, where you're walking into the hotel and everybody's looking at you like, this is my new supervisor, this is my new leader. What kind of challenges and what was going through your head?
So I had to deal with an instance where, some people felt kind of betrayed because they had applied for the position internally, and all of a sudden they see me coming in, and because, I wouldn't say jealousy, but they obviously feel a type of way that they outsourced as opposed to um being considered for the role for working for the company for X amount of years. So that was something that I just tried not to pay attention to, really, because it had nothing to do with me. And what I really had to do was just focus on what I can do to ensure that we as a whole are set up for success, and not worry about like the petty nonsense that comes with that. So that was very brief, and I get along with everybody quite well. So I'd say that was like the first initial thing um, that I had to deal with as a new supervisor is, those kind of like politicking things that you would have issues with.
And that's
Just
important.
to not
Yeah.
pay attention to those.
That's, I think, happens to a lot of people, because everywhere you go, if you're a new hire and you're being hired into a salaried management role, really at any level, or especially, I think especially primarily in a supervisory position, you have people who wanted that job, and anytime you get hired from the outside to come in, that's chances are you're going to encounter that. Was this something that this individual who had applied for this role, did he tell you that up front? Like, how did this even come to your attention?
Oh well, it was everybody. It was the remaining members of the department, because they've been there much longer than I had been. So obviously they're more knowledgeable of the property and how they operate as a whole. So they didn't obviously, I mean, it would be very uncomfortable to go up to your direct supervisor and tell them, I'm not happy that you got this job. I don't think any regular person in a professional environment would go up there to their direct supervisor and be like, "Hey, I don't really like you." So, I mean, it's you just I just had to work through it. I mean, I don't pay attention to that stuff. I really focus on the guest more than I do the. I don't even pay attention to that stuff, honestly. In regards to service, I do want to mention that, uh, especially during this time, service has been something I've been really trying to focus on, because you're always going to have those guests that are going to complain that you're offering like a limited service in regard, especially when you're a luxury boutique beachfront hotel. You guys aren't offering this? No, look, because of everything going on with the pandemic, we had to limit the amount of services to be in compliance with the CDC and everything. And it's kind of been difficult service wise when it comes to that, because you're always going to have those types of people that expect that kind of service, even though we're in the middle of a global, I consider it a plague.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because there are so many people that have died from it, that I mean, how can you offer full service? I mean, you can obviously innovate around that, where you're able to exceed expectations during a global plague, but obviously you have to do so safely.
Yeah, and I do think that it's kind of it's a little bit of a double entendre to a certain extent, which a lot of the guests they realize that. I mean, while yes, there is a legitimate and the primary reason for these, kind of modified service offerings are as a result of, compliance with CDC guidelines or local regulations for whatever your area is. I think there's another element to it of we still have an industry that's financially crippled, where 25% of hotel owners are 30 days or more defaulting on their mortgage payments, payroll. It is hard to even pay the employees who are there. So I think there, in addition, there's a certain element of you're not making as much money, so you can't spend as much to offer these services. And I think has any guest ever said that to you, right? Like, oh, well, you just don't want to pay, like, for example, the stayover service, I know has been a big topic for a lot of hoteliers. Has anybody ever said to you like, oh, well, you guys just don't want to pay your housekeepers, to service my room or anything along those lines? Has that been a topic of conversation?
No, and I'll tell you why. This past summer, we probably had our best summer in terms of revenue. And the reason why is because we're getting a lot of that clientele outside of the Long Island area, from the New York City area, that are looking for like a change in pace and need like a little staycation or anything just to get out of the city and everything. So we've been getting a lot of that clientele within the summer. We were selling out essentially every day.
Wow.
I
Congratulations,
think
by the way.
Thank you. So the hotel's in a very unique position where our shoulder windows are like now, where now is the time where we're slow, like beginning of October, up until spring, I'd say the end of March. Obviously you're going to have those like holiday gatherings where we're still getting wedding parties, but much smaller because of everything going on when it comes to socially distancing and abiding by those CDC guidelines. Long Island's still in phase 4. We haven't really had any sort of backtrack because everything's been kept under control for the most part. In terms of housekeeping, as opposed to like, whether or not people have questioned why we're not doing that. It's not necessarily from a monetary perspective that they're taking issue with it. It's more of the service aspect of it, that you guys aren't servicing my rooms. That's the one person out of every 10 people that really take an issue with it. But you have to in this case, because we have to make sure that we're compliant with the guidelines that were set forth by the CDC and make sure that we're operating in a safe manner. I think it would be really bad and dangerous to like the livelihood of our guests if we're going in every day to service the rooms. We provide a little notice that we explain to them verbally as well during the check-in process that, hey, because of everything going on with the pandemic, to decrease the exposure for contact and everything, our housekeeping services are limited. If you'd like to have them serviced, you can request for it, and if you request for it, we can definitely offer that to you. And again, 9 times out of 10, people are going to be very understanding of that. I have yet to come across a guest who took issue with that when I explained it. I know some of my colleagues have experienced people that complain left and right about it and would go as far as to demand compensation for that. I don't necessarily agree with that, but there has to be an understanding that it's like we're in a very tough time. Like, stuff's going to happen. We have to cut back because of the safety and betterment of our guests.
Right. And first of all, I do want to reiterate that I think it's awesome that your hotel has had a great summer. Now, granted, I know that some markets have seen increases in their occupancy with summer leisure travel, and it sounds like you guys definitely reap the benefits of that in terms of having the occupancy, and sounds like you've been able to drive your rate a little bit too, which is great. So it's good to hear that some of these kind of standard issues that have been you keep seeing them across the industry at a lot of hotels, to at least some of them haven't you haven't had to deal with them personally. So I'm glad to hear that. And hopefully as we continue into the slower season, that continues to be the case for you guys. So in terms of, now that you're a supervisor, right, when you're training on these guidelines, because you're going to have to kind of equip your team with verbiage and help them navigate these tough conversations with guests that are new to everybody, right? For as long as you've been in hotels, for most of us still working, we've never had to tell a guest we won't be servicing your rooms every day as standard, because for decades that's been the standard procedure. So
Right.
how do you approach a member of your team when they struggle with this kind of bad news to a certain extent when they're telling a guest?
So I've actually had the conversation recently with somebody, and what I've noticed consistently is it's all about your tonality and the level of empathy that you have in regards to dealing with, like in general, dealing with difficult guests. So if you come off as, empathetic and trying to put yourself in their shoes, people will be much more receptive, as opposed to if you're just telling them flat out, now, look, listen, we're not doing this because of everything going on X, Y, and Z. People don't like to be told things. They like, as long as you're politely explaining it to them and explaining why you're doing it in a calm, civilized, and empathetic way, I don't see a reason why people would take that the wrong way. And when we had that conversation, we've started receiving less and less complaints in regards to what the reasoning as to why it's not being done. Well, I wouldn't say the reasoning as to why it's being done, or I would say the dissatisfaction that it's not being done. So yeah, no, I mean, it's all about how you convey the message and the tonality and being empathetic about it, because it's inconvenient. People, we're in the business of making sure that we don't inconvenience people too. That's guest services, providing top quality service and ensuring that everybody's happy during their stay. Again, just to reiterate, it's been tough, especially with everything going on, because I'd say the silver lining between all of this is we've learned to become more innovative than we were before, and thinking outside of the box as to how we can best serve our guests moving forward during this time.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with you on all those points you made, and starting with the empathy aspect of you're delivering essentially a policy that you're explaining to a guest, which we know that policies are kind of obviously a hindrance to hospitality to a certain extent, while they are necessary in most cases. So you're delivering a policy to a guest. They're obviously, to your point, escaping city life, coming to get away. They want a luxury experience. It's been 6 months locked up in the house. And, a lot of people are expecting, maybe this is their first hotel stay in a while, that their room is going to be serviced, and you're explaining this bad news to them. And I think when you're training your team, to your point, when you say, we're going to tell them to do it not just by delivering the news point blank period, but by crafting it in a way that makes them, I guess, have a deeper understanding of it. And it's almost like you're working together. You're still telling them, no, we're not going to do it every day, but you're doing it in a way that makes it feel like it's a mutual agreement rather than a mandated policy that you have no control over.
What I told them was, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So how we deliver the message is much, much more important than what you're telling them. Well, I mean, it's obviously, it's important that you tell them, like what you tell them is important, but what's really just important is how you're telling them. I guess that's what really the message I tried to convey to them was to keep it simple. And that's worked out, again, just to reiterate, that has worked out tremendously in a very positive way, because, again, I've yet to receive any sort of additional complaints about it.
That's great. That's great. And it's for everybody right now, it's the adaptability element of being a hotelier is even more paramount than it has been. I think that's something that hoteliers it's been I guess an adjective to describe hoteliers, adaptable, for any situation. We've done it all. We can adapt, and even more so now, because the playbook that we've had to go off of for decades is kind of being torn up, and we have to start from scratch. So even when it comes to those big picture things like rewriting the SOPs for the entire housekeeping department, or some of the smaller, more daily things like, training your team on how to talk to a guest about something so new, all of these changes, add up to something, to the big picture, and it kind of crafts the guest experience in a more positive way when done well. So, as you kind of have been in this role for several months now, right? You've had your fair share of challenges from coming in and dealing with, a team that may have wanted your job before you got there. You dealt with the hurricane. You dealt with, training your team on verbiage and kind of more luxury ways of communicating. How are you feeling now after a few months? Are you feeling a lot more comfortable in your role, or is there anything kind of outstanding that you feel like, what, I'm still new. There's still a couple things that I've yet to work out. Where are you at right now?
So I've always been really confident in this position, because I came from a position where I was, making decisions on my own, as the overnight guy. I was the only one there. I didn't have I didn't have security with me too. That was also a real
That's
beautiful
tough.
thing. Yeah, real beautiful thing. And I'm sarcastically saying beautifully, to have during the time where the area wasn't desirable, as I would say.
Mhm.
So I was very confident in my judgment and leadership skills. Right now, I'm just as confident as I was before, because I had an idea of the team, of the kind of team I was walking into, where they're seasoned and they know what they're doing. I had a new, one of the agents that started with me was just as new as I was. She came from a front office background, so she knows what she's doing. And I trust everybody, where it's nice to have that cushion where you're able to trust everybody especially when you're coming into a new leadership role. Because what I tried to do was take a step back and observe how things were operating, especially after the hurricane and after we opened. I really tried to take a step back and see, how do we do things here? What's something that we could do to change to make this better? I didn't really do that as much, because look, I'm the new guy. I don't want to step on anybody's toes. It's never my intention. But it's been going very well, and my team, I believe, is incredible. And it just goes to show how, trust plays an important factor when it comes to leading a team, because, like I said, I trust them to handle anything they see fit. Compensation wise, I trust them, because they're able to use their judgment on that. They investigate things before just blindly compensating for things, and it's been going very. I think this is probably one of the best teams that I've worked with. Honestly, I know I said that before,
Right.
but the mindset that this team has is much different than any of, because they're in it to win it. They genuinely care, and they don't just settle for something average, which is something that I really admire about this team.
That's really refreshing to hear. Again, it really, I'm getting a sense that your property is an anomaly to the slew of issues that have become pretty standard across the industry right now. And even when it comes to team morale and teams, really being able to put their best foot forward, there's been challenges with that as well, where people are burnt out, exhausted, unmotivated through no fault of their own, obviously, but it's obviously resulted in a lack of care more so than there was before, and so on and so forth. So
take it from me. I left an overnight position because I was too burnt out from the overnights.
Yeah. And so, right. So there you go. Exactly. You're coming from a situation that maybe your previous hotel was kind of dealing with these issues that we're describing, right, that have kind of plagued the majority of hotels in the industry right now. And you're going to a hotel that's almost night and day when it comes to team morale. You're sold out over the summer. I mean, these things that very few people in the U.S. hotel industry were able to say this summer. And it almost makes me think, is it the trust? For example, say you would come in and start, kind of, balls to the wall. Hey, we need to change this. We need to do this. We need to kind of overwhelming them with changes and like kind of authoritarianism in your leadership style. Maybe you'd be seeing different results as far as their level of care and their level of engagement with the work that they're doing right now. So I think by you giving them the opportunity to do the job, they're taking ownership of it, and it's working out really well. So I think that's a huge takeaway for a lot of new leaders in the hotel industry, is like, let your team do the work. One of the things that Charles Dozier, who we interviewed, who at the time was the Hilton Worldwide brand ambassador, he mentioned when you come into a team, especially a tenured one, you're coming into their home. They see, 10 or 15 managers over the time for the 20 years that they're there in a lot of cases. And you may only be with them for 6 months or a year, or whatever the case might be for a lot of managers. So having that respect for the institutional knowledge and loyalty that these people have is critical. And I think you've definitely done a good job of displaying that.
It's really interesting to build off that. I wouldn't have done that if I didn't spend my overnights after doing all the reports investing in myself. So one of the things that I would do after the overnights, because it would be dead, after running the reports and everything for about like 5 hours straight, was I ran through a bunch of modules and certification courses with the American Hotel and Lodging Association. I thought that I would have never had the time to, with this pandemic going on. And so one of the things that I learned from my CHS module is, like, when you first start a supervisory role, like especially going into like a newer one, the relationships kind of change, where you have to look at things from a different perspective and understand that, like while you were buddy with somebody as equals, you now have to take that responsibility to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I guess not feeding into the kind of stuff that you would normally feed into as equals. You see what I mean? You see what I mean when I say that? It's
I certainly do. Yeah. And so you're saying that this was because I have yet to do any of these certifications. So that was actually something that they discussed when you were taking your certified hotel supervisor. Is that what the CHS?
Yes, the certified hospitality supervisor one. That was something where it's one of the modules was morale boosting, and the best kind of leadership style to boost morale, where the autocratic style isn't really especially like when you're just starting a supervisory role, isn't something that you want to take as your first approach. Where if you're just starting a role and you're jumping the gun trying to change every little thing, people are not going to like that. People want to trust you. You have to have your team trust you as a leader, because if your team doesn't have confidence in you as a leader, then you can't lead.
Yeah, because the people decide who leads them. You can have the title but not be a leader, and vice versa. You can not have the title, be a great leader, because the team will decide who gets to lead them. And I think that's a great point. One of a great leader that I had the privilege to work with on task force. He said people want evolution, not revolution. And I think, because change is scary for a lot of people, whether it's in work or at home or just in life in general. And I think particularly work, especially when you're inheriting a tenured team. So one final topic I want to discuss with you before we wrap up is that you inherited a team that was dealing with a lot of trauma, right? Because they were working through the pandemic before you got there, having the hurricane, all of these compounding issues that literally will cause people to have PTSD, trauma, like no exaggeration, will develop some mental health issues for their team, whether it's apparent for others and maybe not so much for other people on the team. Was that something that you realized going into it? Is that something that you found to be an issue on your team with kind of their compounding of the pandemic and the hurricane, or is that not really something that you've had to deal with, the after effects of that?
Honestly, I don't believe I've dealt with any of that. Thinking back on it on the spot, it's nice because I think we all have like a mutual understanding of how it's going to be for the next, hopefully, like a couple of months. Hopefully, when a vaccine comes out at some point. So I think we all have that understanding as to what sacrifices we'll have to make and what sort of additional responsibilities we have to take on. It's very beneficial because everybody understands what they have to do, and everybody knows what we can and can't do in regards to operations, in regards to operating safely. So I don't foresee it being an issue moving forward down the road. Obviously you're gonna have your bumps in the road and everything, but we haven't really come across that at the moment, which I'm sure we will. But that's every team.
Yeah, and honestly, again, I'm so glad to hear that. It sounds like you have an amazing and incredible team behind you. And it's wonderful to hear that, because the only people we can rely on right now, besides our families, especially in the hotel industry, are the people that we work next to day in and day out. So it's great to hear that. It sounds like your hotel and your team have a long road of continued successes on the horizon for you. So before we wrap up here, what do you, let's say we talk to you again a year from now. What do you hope to be discussing with us? Where do you hope to be at the time? Tell me a little bit about what the future holds for you, Jonathan.
I hope we're in an environment where we don't need masks every day. But I hope to see the industry really revitalize after all of this. I hope to be hopefully in a higher position with the same company. I've according to my managers, I've been performing very well. So it sounds like things are headed in the right direction. I started during the pandemic, I started an Instagram page where, it's not just hospitality is a broad umbrella of things where it's hotels, restaurants, the airline industry. So this is a big industry where people are getting hammered when it comes to dealing with financial debts and liabilities. What I did to try and help promote local businesses, but I started my own Instagram, kind of like an influencing page, where I've been going out to places, whether it's with my girlfriend or whether it's with friends. I've been promoting and taking photos and posting the photos to my Instagram page to try and get people to go out there and try the food, because a lot of the stuff I post is really good. So very fattening, but very good.
Right.
So yeah, no, the page is called the Food Plug 516. I tried to put like a hip hop perspective into it, because like a plug is sort of like a connect. So like putting people on to good food and everything. And I hope to grow that as kind of like a side hustle, because I'd love to be like some sort of influencer, especially like trying to contribute what I can to help the industry in the best way possible.
That's a great way to put it, Jonathan. Everybody, whether it's your contributions at the hotel or your contributions on the side with helping to promote local businesses and restaurants, especially in your local community, will certainly go a long way in the continued recovery of the hotel industry. So we'll definitely be sure to plug your new Instagram, the Food Plug 516, in the show notes so everybody can check that out. Jonathan Fabietti is also very active on LinkedIn, so we'll certainly put the link to his profile there. Is there anywhere else you want our listeners to find you, Jonathan?
Well, that's really it that I have right now. The one thing I really want to end with is show support to the first responders. These people are sacrificing a lot during this time. A lot of people aren't even seeing their families, and a lot of people have lost their loved ones for like especially with first responders and everything. My sister's a nurse, and she's on the front lines dealing with people going through all of this, and my hat's off to her, because it takes a lot, and it really takes a toll on you working those 12-hour shifts. So donate to any sort of fundraisers if you can to like relief efforts for the hospitality industry, because this is a big industry and it's one of the most important industries in this world. So I really just want to make sure that we shine some light into all the hard work that everybody's been putting in. Thank you for having me again. I hope to come back again sometime soon to discuss some updates to the industry. And yeah, no, it's been a pleasure, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan, thank you again. Your passion, as always, for hotels and hospitality is certainly inspiring. And again, it's been a pleasure staying connected with you over this past year through everything going on. Just having another friend in the industry is certainly goes a long way to helping us all feel better during this crisis. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And for everyone listening, thank you for tuning into another episode of the Hospitality MD podcast. Again, I tell you that we have some very big updates coming, so tune in for that. And be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you enjoyed the show, and to share this with your friends. And we will see you again next time. Jonathan, thank you again, my friend.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.